Greetings and welcome back to Doctor Who Revisited, my ongoing series where I go through every single Doctor Who episode from 1963 all the way up to 2022 and review them. And this is probably my favorite William Hartnell era episode and easily my favorite season 2 episode. Season 2 being the season 2 of the classic series, The Web Planet. I suppose I should stress this. There is some bit of traumatic memories involving the Menoptera for me personally. If you know, you know. I'm not really going to repeat it much.
All right, and it
Is that a
was
real species?
it was
It's close.
the Menoptera.
No!
Who?
Fucking way!
And I picked this one to challenge you, 50.
No!
Hey, 50, you're not a real Doctor Who fan. You're a fake.
But that being said, it's still one of my absolute favorite episodes of Doctor Who of all time. And yes, I understand some of the complaints. It looks cheap. It looks cheesy. It's a classic example of how they used to make Doctor Who in the 60s. The costumes look a certain way. The props, the sets look a certain way. But you know what? Who cares? It's a good story. I really lovable characters. It's a very rarity where it's got great world building and great lore, and it's not written by Terry Nation, which is also a bit of a plus, sort of. So I love the Menoptera. I love the Zarbi, the Larvae Guns. I think that their name. I don't know. Their names differ depending on which source you use, but yeah, the Larva Guns and the Animus, really great villain. That's one of those great villains that just takes over the companions and even makes the Doctor looks weak by comparison, and yet the Doctor and friends still beat it eventually. But overall, it's a really good story. It's another example of what I said earlier in my review for the Romans. They split all the characters up, and even though for the majority of the episode the Doctor and Vicky are together, they both have their same different storylines and story arcs. Ian is doing his own thing with the Optra below ground. Barbara's doing her own thing with the Menoptera, first out in the open and then in the Crater of Needles, and then fighting back against the Zarbi. And obviously, eventually all the characters then eventually meet up together to take on the Animus together. But yeah, it's one of those examples of William Hartnell era episodes where every single individual part of the overall serial gives you something different. First is obviously setting up the stage of Vortis and the Web Planet itself. Then there's the setting up of the Zarbi versus the Menoptera and the Animus' Enclave. There's setting up the Crater of Needles. Then there's the assault that the Menoptera, or some of the Menoptera, have had from some of the other moons on the Zarbi. There's just so much action and so much plot in this episode, and they managed to break it down into 6 individual parts brilliantly. And I love that the Menoptera were basically the underdogs, even though they've been sort of the rulers of the planet Vortis for a very long time, and the Zarbi for the most part have been their slaves. When the turn happens and the Animus shows up and the Zarbi take over, it's really the Menoptera, these flying humanoid bees, were far superior above the more animalistic walking ants in the on the planet. The Menoptera were basically the underdogs, and the Zarbi, mostly controlled by the Animus, they were on top, and they really did beat the Menoptera many times, both before the events of the episode and even during the events of the episode, with ripping out they're just like this horrifying scene. And again, it's done with 60s era production value, so it is what it is. But there's this horrifying scene where the Zarbi just capture one of the Menoptera and then just rip out his wings in front of Barbara. And again, the look on Jacqueline Hale's face when this happened really just sells the scene and the horror and the dread of this episode. It seems to be a very recurring theme with season 2 so far, starting with obviously with Planet of Giants, the Dalek invasion of Earth, and all the other episodes in the series. it's a lot less kid friendly this season, I would say. But yeah, and I love I loved Ian's side story with the Optra, and I love the first few scenes where you see the Doctor and Ian together. And this is again going back to what I said earlier about the Romans episode, is you get an extended sequence with Barbara and Vicky inside the TARDIS, and they just talk about what happened in Rome, and Barbara's trying to explain to Vicky they didn't stay at the house the whole time. They were both captured and brought to Rome at the same time that they were there, and they actually got to. She was actually right alongside Caesar Nero, and so again, this is one of those things where you just wouldn't have the time to develop the characters the way that they did in this episode in the modern series, which is one of the reasons I appreciate the fact that these episodes were so long and the serials were multi-part serials. There really isn't much I can say about this episode other than just I love it. I love it dearly, and just I think I've already pretty much explained everything that I can say about this episode because, again, for what they had to work with at the time, good-looking sets, love the design of the creatures. It's another one of those planets from the classic era that I wish they bring back in the modern series. It saddens me that so many of these great settings and locations were just one-offs, and so many of these great creatures never really came back. Now, obviously, the Tsar we have, I believe, came back in comic book form, at least on one occasion that I know of. But for the most part, it's an iconic episode from the classic series. It's one of those episodes where you think of the classic series, especially if you think of the William Hartnell era, your mind immediately goes to that episode. I mean, there's Menoptera in An Adventure in Time and Space from 2013, the sort of pseudo biopic about the show and William Hartnell. So it's definitely, this episode is about as synonymous with the first Doctor as, I don't know, the Dalek invasion of Earth or many other episodes that are so just entrenched in Doctor Who mythology. It's a sad thing that this episode was never really revisited much. But on the bright side, at least it's one of those episodes that never really got junked or thrown away. There was never a missing episode. So that's really a plus. Like I said, not much to say about this episode. I think I managed to cover all the major points relatively fast. So I'm just going to end this review right here. So next episode is, unfortunately, another missing episode. But fortunately, it's not the entire episode is missing. So I guess that's a plus. And I believe, yeah, it's the only missing episode as far as we know right now. It's the only missing episode in season 2. I think some of the other episodes were missing from season 2, but they were found. So right now, as it stands, it is the only serial from season 2 that has several parts of it missing. So I'll talk about that once I'll get to it. But until then, goodbye for now.
Hi there! Thank you for watching the video. And if you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and tell your friends. I'll see you next time.